Good evening, schoolboys and survival experts. I have something a bit different in store for you all tonight. Previously on this channel, I've covered a couple of different romance books, but I'd really like to try talking about lots of different genres, both modern and classic, and I have one of the latter of those for you tonight. As I'm sure you can guess by the title of this video, I'll be taking my first foray into classic lit with Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This video is going to be a bit different than my previous uploads. I'm still going to cover the entire plot of Lord of the Flies, but this time I'm also going to take time to analyze some of the themes and symbols that I noticed during my read, since there really is a lot to unpack with this one that wouldn't fit nicely into my overall explanation of the plot. But first, in case you haven't seen me before, hi, my name's Scribe, and on my channel I like to talk about books and book-related stuff, so if that sounds interesting to you, maybe consider hitting subscribe so you can see more of me. Alright. So as usual, I'm going to cover the first chapter since in my not-so-humble opinion, anything that happens in the first chapter isn't a spoiler before I give anyone who wants to jump out and read Lord of the Flies for themselves a chance to do so. The book opens directly into things with, the boy with the fair hair lowered himself down the last few feet of rock and began to pick his way towards the lagoon. The boy, who we eventually learn is named Ralph, has recently been stranded on a deserted island. He, along with the other schoolboys who we'll eventually encounter, was on a plane from Britain in order to evacuate from the war when the plane was shot down and crashed into the island. Ralph encounters another boy, who Ralph gives the nickname Piggy despite his protests. The two of them are discussing their situation when they find a large conch shell that Piggy suggests they use to call together any other survivors from the crash in order to have an assembly. They blow the conch, and as others begin to emerge onto the beach where Ralph and Piggy are waiting, they quickly realize that the only survivors are all boys roughly between the ages of 6 and 14. They decide to elect Ralph as their leader despite the challenge by another boy named Jack. Jack is the head of what is implied to have been a boys' choir, and the other members of it are still loyal to him. He insists that he and his followers become the hunters of the group, aiming to go after the wild pigs that are on the island. Ralph, Jack, and another boy from the choir named Simon go out on a scouting trip to get a lay of the land and confirm that they are in fact on an uninhabited island before returning to the others. Now, if you'd like to read the rest for yourself, feel free to pause the video now because from here on out we'll be in Spoiler Town. I'll admit, this is one of those books that it's a bit hard to go into completely blind since it's so widely talked about. But even so, in case you have managed to avoid learning anything about what happens next, I'm gonna give a little warning here that there will be discussions of violence, so just be warned. When the trio returns to the beach, Ralph calls another assembly to tell the others what they've learned and to discuss what they should do next. Ralph insists that they should focus on lighting a signal fire atop the small mountain at the center of the island, since it would give them the best chance of getting spotted by passing ships and getting rescued. That's when one of the younger children asks what they're going to do about the beast that he'd seen in the woods. He says that he saw a large snake, though the others largely laugh off the idea that there's anything hostile on their island. I, however, am going to put a pin in this idea because it's going to come up later. The boys all head off together to build a bonfire on top of the mountain. They manage to light it using Piggy's glasses, and in the ensuing chaos, the fire grows out of control and causes a large section of the woods on the island to burn. At this point, Piggy draws attention to how out of control that things have become, and they realize with horror that the same little boy who'd asked about the beast is now missing, and is assumed to have been killed by the forest fire. After this, things seem to calm down for a bit, and the boys settle into their new roles on the island. Time passes, and the boys survive on scavenged fruits while Jack and his hunters try and fail to kill a boar for them to eat. Piggy and Ralph struggle to put together shelters for everyone without the help of Jack or his hunters, and discuss with him and Simon some of the issues that they've noticed. Simon suggests that there might be something on the island with them after all, an idea which none of them are particularly fond of. The tensions between the boys begin to become more noticeable when Ralph sees a ship pass by on the horizon and realizes with horror that the signal fire on top of the mountain is out, which was supposed to be the responsibility of Jack's hunters. When Ralph tries to confront him about it, his concerns are largely brushed off because Jack had needed all of the hunters in order to secure their first kill. Ralph and Jack get into a fight, and during the scuffle, one of the lenses of Piggy's glasses gets broken before they're able to get the fire lit again. Things settle down again for a bit after that, until one night a dogfight breaks out over the island while all the boys are sleeping. A dead man parachutes down to the island, where the twins, Sam and Eric, who were supposed to be keeping watch over the fire, see the fluttering of the parachute when they wake up the next morning and mistake it for the beast. They run back to the other boys in a panic, who immediately work on organizing a hunting party. Jack, Ralph, and two others head up the mountain, but when one of the boys is too frightened to continue the climb, Ralph offers to stay with him so that he won't have to be alone while Jack continues onward. From the glimpses that the boys get of the parachuter, the boys come to the conclusion that the beast is actually some kind of primate, and return to the beach to tell the others what they've learned and decide what they should do next. During the following assembly, Jack tries to argue that Ralph should be removed as leader because he was cowardly for not going up the mountain with him, but the vote fails by a wide margin. Jack leaves, feeling hurt that the boys wouldn't side with him, and says that he'll be taking his hunters to form a new tribe elsewhere on the island. Things begin to break down at this point, with most of the other boys considering the assembly to be over, leaving Ralph, Piggy, and Simon to discuss what they should do next. Simon argues that they should try and venture back up the mountain to try and relight the signal fire, but Ralph decides that they should build a new fire on the beach since it'll be easier for the smaller remaining group to keep it going during the day. They decide to work on rebuilding the fire with the remaining daylight, realizing later that Simon is gone. Meanwhile, Jack announces to his new tribe of hunters that they're going to prioritize hunting for meat, and will try to stay out of the beast's way. They paint their faces with dirt and clay, fully embracing their idea of a savage lifestyle while they go find a mother pig to hunt and kill, leaving its severed head as an offering to the beast. We later return to Simon, who finds that severed head swarmed by flies and has a vision or a hallucination that it's speaking to him, his mind calling it the Lord of the Flies. "What are you doing out here all alone? Aren't you afraid of me?" Simon shook. "There isn't anyone to help you. Only me, and I'm the beast." Simon's mouth labored, brought forth audible words. "Pig's head on a stick?" "Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill," said the head. For a moment or two, the forest and all other dimly appreciated places echoed with the parody of laughter. "You knew, didn't you? I'm part of you. Close, close, close. I'm the reason why it's no-go, why things are what they are." The laughter shivered again. "Come now," said the Lord of the Flies. "Get back to the others and we'll forget this whole thing." Simon's head wobbled. His eyes were half closed as though he were imitating the obscene thing on a stick. He knew that one of his times was coming on. The Lord of the Flies was expanding like a balloon. "This is ridiculous. You know perfectly well you'll only meet me down there, so don't try to escape." Simon faints, and when he wakes up, he continues to the top of the mountain where he finds the body of the parachuter and realizes that there was no beast after all. He cuts the body down from where it had been strung up in the trees before making his way down to where he sees a bonfire on the beach to try and tell the others what he's learned. Meanwhile, Ralph and Piggy are discussing their situation when one of the boys who went off with Jack comes by to invite them all to a feast that they'll be holding with the pig that they'd killed. All of the boys join, and Jack uses the feast as another opportunity to make a bid for leadership of all the boys on the island. Ralph threatens to blow the conch and call an assembly even though he didn't bring it with him to the feast, and Jack stirs everyone up with a dance and a makeshift ritual calling for the death of the beast. Even Ralph and Piggy get caught up in the theatrics and join in on the dance, and when a figure cloaked in shadow emerges from the forest, all the boys leap upon it, thinking him to be the beast. The sticks fell and the mouth of the new circle crunched and screamed. The beast was on its knees in the center, its arms folded over its face. It was crying out against the abominable noise, something about a body on the hill. The beast struggled forward, broke the ring, and fell over the steep edge of the rock to stand by the water. At once, the crowd surged after it, poured down the rock, leapt onto the beast, screamed, struck, bit, tore. There were no words and no movements but the tearing of teeth and claws. The next morning, Ralph and Piggy discuss what they've done, knowing even in the moments afterwards that they were all complicit in murdering Simon. Jack and a few of his hunters attack and steal Piggy's glasses so that they can make fire without relying on the others. Ralph, Piggy, Sam, and Eric decide to take the conch and make a bid to Jack to try and peacefully get Piggy's glasses back. They make their way to where Jack and his followers have set up their camp, which has become an improvised fortress, and try to ask for things to be resolved peacefully. Jack refuses to return the glasses, orders that Sam and Eric be captured, and tries to fight Ralph to the death. During the following battle, one of Jack's followers rolls a boulder down from above them, which hits and kills Piggy, his body falling off the cliff and being washed out to the sea. Ralph manages to escape, returning later to tell Sam and Eric to do whatever they can to save their own lives, even if it means joining in on whatever Jack has planned. They in turn tell him that they already know that Jack is intending to take all of the boys to hunt him down and kill him, and that he should do whatever he can to run and hide while he still has the chance. Ralph spends the following day and night being hunted by Jack and the others. Just when it looks like Ralph is going to get caught, he runs into a Navy officer on the beach who saw their smoke signal and is finally there to help him and the others get off the island. The officer chides Ralph for not being able to keep order of the others, comparing their time to a more lighthearted adventure story, not realizing how bad that things had become for him and the others during their stay. Ralph and the other boys break down into tears, and the story ends with the officer turning away from what he perceives as an awkward display of emotion. So, now that we've gone over the plot of Lord of the Flies, I'd like to try something a bit different with this video. This book is almost entirely a metaphor, which is part of the reason why it's widely considered to be a classic. A lot of the main themes in the book, such as the idea of the struggle between man and nature and society, have all been mentioned before in other places, and have been analyzed by people a whole lot smarter and a whole lot more eloquent than me. So I'm going to instead focus on some of the less often focused on symbols in Lord of the Flies. Outside of the previously mentioned themes, the most obvious thing that someone can pick out from a first read of the book is of course the existence of the beast and what it means in different parts of the story. Early on, the beast is described as being a serpent, a literal snake in the grass, a sinister force lurking just below the surface that no one wants to acknowledge. However, after the incident with the parachuter, the boys decide that the beast has an arguably more human-like shape, which builds into the revelation that Simon discovers that the real beast is something that exists in everyone. It's mankind's capacity for evil. Therefore, the boys' denial of the beast's existence is representative of their childlike naivete, their refusal to believe that anyone, let alone anyone among them, is capable of causing real harm to them. Unfortunately, despite how much they wish to deny it, the reality is that without adults being around to break up fights or to threaten detention when they cause problems, they're actually capable of some really terrible things. By the end of the book, Ralph and the other boys have experienced a loss of their innocence, now knowing undeniably that they, and by extension humanity as a whole, have the capacity to cause great harm to others. In a different way, this potential for harm is hinted at from the very first chapter in the choice of animal that the boys have to hunt: pigs. Pigs are, generally speaking, fairly biologically similar to humans, and certain species are even considered to be decently intelligent, which is why it seemed like it had to be a deliberate choice that the only animals ever mentioned being on the island are wild pigs. In my opinion, the fact that it's pigs being hunted instead of any other animal highlights the narrow line between killing an animal and killing a human. Additionally, Piggy the character can be seen as a kind of intellectual and moral compass. The only reason that he isn't the leader of the group is that Ralph is more attractive and charismatic. However, the choice in his derogatory nickname to me feels like another tie between the boys and the animals on the island. For that reason, I'll be honest, I was genuinely a bit surprised that he wasn't the first to die. Instead, it's just the breaking of his glasses at different points in the story that represents the growing distance between the boys and the ideas that they would have strived to uphold under other circumstances. Finally, I also wanted to acknowledge another idea that I've seen regarding this book. The idea that if the characters in the book weren't all boys or weren't all British, that things would have gone differently. And honestly, I completely agree. Western society is, generally speaking, more individualistic in a way that makes people disincentivized to work together, something which is absolutely necessary in a survival situation. While I can't exactly speak for the values of other cultures, I think that the high value placed on leadership combined with the acceptance of aggressive behavior from boys really is a recipe for disaster, especially when those boys are put into a situation that they can't even comprehend the severity of. In my opinion, if it were a group consisting of any other demographic other than British children and preteen boys, the story would have had a much lower body count. Overall, I don't really have any major complaints about the book. It was far shorter than either of the previous books I've covered, but the script ended up taking far longer to put together because I kept having to take breaks to lay on the floor and stare at the ceiling while contemplating the true nature of humanity. Something, mankind is naturally evil and must deliberately work towards being good. But I'm not really trying to turn this into a psychology essay, so I'll leave you all to debate your opinions on the nature of humanity in the comments. All of that being said, if you made it this far into the video, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. And all jokes aside, I know this video is super late. Life sure has been happening, and I really would like to try and get back on a consistent schedule for video uploads going forward. I also have a few ideas for videos that I'd like to make in the future that are more book related rather than just about books specifically that I hope to be able to start putting into production soon and should be a bit quicker to script than these kinds of videos are. In the meantime, if you can't get enough of my voice, I'm currently live streaming on Twitch 3 times a week, so I'd absolutely love it if you came by to say hi. Again, thank you all so much for watching. What did you all think of Lord of the Flies? If you had to be trapped on a deserted island with a bear or a group of 12-year-old boys, which one would you choose? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. That should be it from me tonight, but as always, remember to stay curious.